Indira Gandhi National Open University presents a program for the students of Master of Journalism and Mass Communication, Master of Journalism and Electronic Media and Postgraduate Diploma in Journalism and Mass Communication titled Emergence of Digital Media Part 2, Program Code MAJMC, MAJEM and PGJMC. Course code MJM020. The presenter of the program is Dr. Shikha Rai, Associate Professor, School of Journalism and New Media Studies, IGNOU. Let's listen to the program.
Welcome, dear learners. This is yet another part of emergence of digital media that we will be talking about in this session. And here we will be talking about how the digital media has emerged, as in India, along with its historical perspective. We will also be looking at digital media in print, digital media in television, in radio, the emergence of different trends in digital media, as well as the data-driven journalism. We will also be talking about digital stories and mapping in journalism. So all of these are very interesting and exciting things which will help you learn and discover more about this medium of digital media, which is now all over the place. So let us begin with the first things. The digital media in India is something that we are going to figure out how it has spread so far and wide and how it is the harbinger of a digital revolution. So India is, as of date, going through a digital revolution, and the amount of growth and country has seen in terms of internet penetration is unprecedented. It is huge. India is one of the top countries in the world in terms of internet users, and we are all well aware of that. The government's Digital India program, which was launched by the Department of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of Communications and Information Technology, Government of India, has given a big fillip to the digital media in India. So the Digital India campaign is centered around three visions. Now, what are these three visions? One is digital infrastructure, which is at the core of utility for every citizen. So I and you in our daily lives require digital media, require the internet, and require the use of digital media so as to be able to assess and access information on various platforms. The other is governance and services on demand. So one can apply for an Aadhaar card online, one can apply for a bank account online. Those are the various services that are being provided in the country through the government. And the third bit of this is digital empowerment of citizens. So whenever you see something going wrong, the concept of citizen journalism has emerged. People record it, take the videos of it and post it on social media. This is in a way empowering a common man to do something about an issue or an event that one feels strongly about. It is also about being able to opine, present your own point of view in the public sphere. So, all the digital initiatives to fulfill these above-mentioned visions will contribute significantly in strengthening digital media in the country. Now, having said that, while it has already contributed in increasing the number of internet users in India, the implementation of digital infrastructure as a core utility for every citizen will also increase the internet penetration, which is as of now low as compared to other countries. Even globally, when we speak about this, only 50% of the audiences have digital haves. So they can be called digital haves, they can be called people with internet access, with information access, which is on this date so important for everyone. India has also seen tremendous growth in mobile use, both in data as well as voice, and this holds good for the urban communities as well as rural communities. Though it took 2 decades to reach 1 billion connections covering over 500 million unique subscribers. So that is the count that we have reached so far. India has become one of the largest mobile markets in the world. This trend encouraged people in the media industry to take media mobile apps more seriously. In times to come, we will not be having a lot of websites. All the websites will get converted into apps. So this is when mobile media apps come into the play. And everybody, all the industry people realized that this is going to be important. A number of media houses have created their own apps so that they can connect with those 500 million subscribers. Also, because of the popularity of platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, you name them, and there are so many these days, there is a need to repurpose content for those who are consuming media messages using these platforms. Now, you will appreciate the fact that there are different audiences that are hooked onto different social media platforms. Like, say, for example, when we talk of the youngsters, it's Instagram that is more popular with them. And while the elderly generation or people who are adults make less use of social media, these are the people who are still clinging onto Facebook. So things keep changing by and large. And that is why these platforms become more important or less important, because they can spread your opinion. They can encourage people's opinion to be shared on the public platform, in the public sphere, and then create a consensus upon how a community or how a society feels about a certain matter in question. So, media industry reaches have shown that media content creation, access, and consumption have gone through enormous changes in the second decade of the 21st century, globally also, as well as within India also. And these shifts will be more dramatic in the decades to come. Now, there are three main factors that are responsible for this trend. The first is technology and internet access, especially fast mobile data and broadband. The second is the kind of gadgets that people are using these days. Gadgets are becoming smaller, stronger, especially the smartphones and streaming media devices. And the third is the app ecosystem per se. When I say the app ecosystem, what I essentially mean is the environment whereby which leads to an increase or leads to encouraging the use of mobile apps. Like I said, that websites are heavy. So in times to come, we won't be having a lot of websites. We will only be having apps. Why? Because they're lighter. They can get into any kind of smart gadget, a smartphone, which is available with the audiences. So the times to come are that of the app. And this is the app ecosystem, an ecosystem in which a certain sector of the business flourishes. So, the growth in digital advertising has been the maximum over the past few years as compared to other media segments. We can look at the reports of FICCI, we can look at the reports of KPMG. So, there are various agencies which on an annual basis create the whole idea of how the advertising business is running, how is the entertainment industry doing, so on and so forth. So the growth has been maximum over the past few years, and one of the reasons has been the growth and spurt in the use of digital media. And this also includes the mobile internet users. Now let us look at the historical perspective of digital media. Looking at print per se, in India, the Hindu was the first newspaper to start its own website way back in the year 1995. And most of the newspapers thereafter built their own websites to connect with the people who had access to internet. Since during those days, all the people were not connected with the internet. Even now, as we speak, 50% of the population globally does not have access to internet. But yet, during those times, this access was even more scanty. And in 2007, Malayala Manorama became the first regional newspaper to establish its presence in digital media by launching a mobile app. Newspaper like Times of India or the Hindustan Times, the Hindu, the Indian Express, they all joined Twitter around 2009 to 10, and that was precisely the time when Twitter was launched. In 2012, Times of India forayed into augmented reality by launching its Alive app. Now, this app would allow the user to scan any picture or graphic and then take them to be the relevant multimedia content. After 2012, it was the year 2013 when mobile media apps became really popular. One app that emerged as a leader was InShorts, and it is available even today. And you would look at it as a medium of gathering news in smaller capsules. So there would be less content, one visual, and InShorts will be speaking about what is the latest that has happened. And as you browse through in your entire day, newer news keeps coming up. The app was an instant success and was based on the premise that people would like to consume messages quickly. Hence, the news is constructed in such a way that it delivers the entire story in a few words. Now, here we need to understand that this was not a completely new phenomena. While the newspapers were waging a war against each other and there was so much of intermedia, intramedia competition, we saw that newspapers were trying to meet the needs of all segments of the audiences. They were not really keen on leaving out any segment, be it the housewives, be it the children, be it the elderly, or be it the reader who is in a hurry, who would only like to scan through the headlines. So there was something for everyone in those newspapers. And that is precisely the trend that digital media also picked on. Now, to make their content easily accessible through search engines, many media outlets forayed into search engine optimization or digital marketing. Now, we all roughly understand what search engine optimization means. Whenever somebody is trying to look for some keywords, say for example, bread, whatever are the top searches, when you Google the term bread, the top searches will be listed. And the whole effort of staying in this top search is called search engine optimization. So through the search engine, you are able to optimize the findings of what you're looking for. Social media marketing became important during this time as the content started growing. Media houses trained their staff or hired digital marketing agencies just to be on the top of list of search engine result page and to get more clicks and traffic. So if you want to maybe look for a place that you would want to go over the weekend, you would like to Google the places near to this city, places near to this state. And the top searches that would come, usually what people do is they do not explore beyond top 10 or top 15 searches. So what is the whole idea for a marketer? It is to stay in that list of top 10 or top 15. And that is what search engine optimization means. A lot of experiments were also being done in the ways that the news was being told. A number of digital tools were explored that allowed development of stories in different ways. And this was the year of immersive storytelling, where the idea would be that the audiences should be taken so much nearer to the reality and to the aspects of how an event has taken place was what was immersive storytelling. And it is still evolving. There are still newer ways of storytelling. Today we are talking of narratology, narrative analysis, and various other ways by which the audience that is not with you can travel there and can have a glimpse of how things unfolded, how an event took place. So, Malayalam Manorama Online started offering 360-degree videos. You would see even when you're on any social media platform, say for example, Facebook, you know that there are ways how you can shake your videos. You can give different dimensions of your videos. So, wherever you're standing can be seen from different degrees, different angles of the camera. So Malayalam Manorama started it way back, and it was an experience of having 360-degree videos. Immersive storytelling aims at giving the consumers a feeling of reality, being there. Through 3D gaming, 360-degree videos, virtual reality, augmented reality, all these technologies that have come today have become so much a part of a live experience that the audience is able to get through their media. Now, the delivery of news and storytelling is made more hard-hitting and entertaining by use of such advanced technologies. You would appreciate that when we are watching an OTT platform, more and more integration of interactivity is being done on these platforms. So the idea is that the viewer or the audience becomes a part of the story itself. The more immersive technologies, the more the augmented reality and immersive technologies are being used in the process, the better the experience gets. Now let us look at digital media and television. Now, with the increase of internet connectivity and availability of inexpensive smartphones, there was an explosion of online videos. Anyone who had access to technology and internet-enabled phone also had the opportunity to create and disseminate videos. Now, this is what we call prosumers. These are the people who are consuming media content and also producing media content. So, one could also do something which was unheard of till a few years back. And one could create one's own news channel. That is what people are doing these days. Everyone has their own YouTube channel. Some things that would be dedicated to cookery, others that would be dedicated to DIYs, yet other on education, so on and so forth. So that was the beginning of the era when digital media started intervening in the field of television. Depending on the interest, YouTube is full of channels on politics, news, entertainment, etc. And the reach of many of these channels is much more than that of a traditional TV channel. The last few years have witnessed massive growth in the number of videos that were created and uploaded on digital media. In addition to internet connectivity and inexpensive smartphones, this was made possible by new digital tools that allow creating and editing of videos on the go. So these softwares used to be heavy and they used to take a lot of RAM, a lot of space inside your system. Now these are limited to being small apps that can be there in your phone, and while you've shot something, the same footage can be put to editing in an app, and on mobile itself it can be edited and be ready for uploading on your YouTube channel. So through this, most of the social networking websites like Facebook or Snapchat, Twitter, they all integrated these tools so that anyone could create and disseminate these videos in no time for the 42% of the world population that is connected to the internet. Now, some of the emerging trends we are witnessing nowadays are immersive storytelling and video selfies, etc. I will give you some examples of how this worked. The Quint, the online news platform, roped in Barkha Dutt, a senior journalist, in the year 2017 while the state elections of UP were going on for new media journalism. She used selfie videos. She used Facebook Live extensively to cover UP elections. Also, the New York Times announced its launch on Snapchat Discover Forum in the year 2017 itself. The idea was to reach 41% of all 18 to 34-year-old people in the United States as they were using Snapchat. In comparison, an average individual US TV network reaches only 6% of the same demographic population. So, from media marketing point of view, it is very important and relevant that if your product, if your content has to be successful, you need to understand who your audience is, what your target audience likes, and which kind of platforms are they available on. If you're trying to talk about your content in the newspaper, for the youngsters who do not browse the newspapers at all and are only on Snapchat and Instagram, probably you're failing in your marketing efforts. So, the examples of Quint and the New York Times showed us that new technology was shaping the new media messages that were being constructed in media in a big way. And TV no longer has the monopolies over videos. Even online newspapers host videos on their portal. So nobody, in fact, today has the monopoly over videos the way TV used to have earlier. So everybody is a content creator as long as you have internet connectivity and smartphones, and everybody can post what they strongly feel about on the internet. Then we touch upon digital media and radio. Now, radio was another segment, and keeping in view the increase in internet penetration and growth of smartphone segments in India, the traditional broadcast radio channels have taken their stations online, and there are companies that run internet-based radio services as well, which is what we call internet radio. Now, radio has remained a strong partner of the media and marketing mix because the speciality of this medium is that it is meant for the ear. So whenever people are doing something which is more passive in nature, they can pay attention to the information which is coming to them through radio. So radio enjoys this uniqueness to this date, and digital media is entering the radio sector as well. Gyan Dhara in IGNOU is a fair example of that. Radio broadcasters are then adapting well to how digital channels are changing in the industry, turning mobile phones and the internet into a way to extend their brands, protect their listener share, and reach newer audiences. Radio stations these days have also created engaging websites and apps where audiences can listen to podcasts, stream radio broadcasts, and experience visual, video, text, or interactive content. Now, having said this, it is important to understand that interactivity is a factor which is so closely aligned with the digital media that none of the marketers, none of the media makers, none of the content creators who have anything to do with any of these digital media platforms can do away with interactivity. So to build in better interactivity, it is important that the idea of getting a feedback should always be there. So, the next thing that we're going to discuss now is the emerging trends in digital media, specifically in accordance to data-driven journalism. You would all have heard about data journalism, how big data, how data analytics have become so important these days for media makers, for marketers, and the entire business sector, business community. Data is being used by media houses to tell stories. Open data movement has made it easier for communicators and journalists to access data and use data. Many countries are releasing their data as open data so that it can be used by the public for various purposes. What do we mean by that? Say, for example, when I say that 50% of the Indian population has access to internet and digital media appliances and digital media gadgets, digital media tools and information. Where am I getting this data from? So the idea of opening of the data is to invite people to participate in the dialogue in this democracy. So similar to this, there can be other things like how much population of the country was actually affected by corona, or what is the rate of employment in the country, or what is the rate of literacy of women in the country. All this is a part of open data which government lets people access and create an opinion about it or do something about it, because at the end of all, it is not just the policymakers, it is also the community and what we do for ourselves which matters. In India, www.data.gov.in platform. This is the platform which hosts data from all the ministries and departments. Credible, dependable data. NDSAP was notified by Government of India in March 2012 to promote a culture of data sharing and data utility for meeting larger socioeconomic goals. Adhering to the norms laid out by this policy, the National Informatics Center, which is also called NIC, has set up Open Government Data Platform India, the state-of-art dynamic data sharing platform espousing the principle of open government data. The portal has many rich features to support this policy. Some of these features are search and discovery mechanism, which is for instant access to various data sets and is of great importance to people. Then we also have community engagements around published data sets for innovative applications on open data with an ability to provide customized citizen services. So tools and apps and visualization that were developed by these platforms have played a pivotal role in increasing the level of transparency and citizens' participation in the governance process. And data journalism is about using this sheer scale of data, the magnitude of data, to present your story and the range of digital information which is available with you to make your story credible and make them more compelling. The focus of data journalism is not on what happened, but on what a particular development may mean to the people in the country. So this is why data journalism suddenly has become more important, and this new form of storytelling has emerged, which is largely backed by digital media. Now, there are a number of digital tools which are available to work on when you're making some data-based stories. And some of these tools could be Google Fusion Table or Lucidchart, Silk, Infogram, Pictochart, Tableau, and Carto. So these are the various tools one can make use of. Alongside, there are also newer tools that keep coming up. They keep getting added in and day out, and one should explore them to know more, because newer the tool, better the features you get. Now, having said this, let us also discuss what digital stories. This is a new way of storytelling completely, and it means telling stories by using computer-based tools. They're also known as digital documentaries or computer-based narratives, and they are in various forms like digital essays, electronic memoirs, and interactive storytelling. They all revolve around the idea of combining the art of telling stories with a variety of multimedia, including graphics and audio and video and web publishing. So various other tools of digital media get used to make the art of storytelling better. The duration of these digital stories are shorter, usually 2 to 5 minutes. These days, if you see, there are reels on YouTube also and on Facebook also. Now, some of these tools which are used to tell digital stories are Powtoon, Movely, and VVideo. And of course, like I said, newer tools keep getting added time and again. So in 2 to 5 minutes, by making short reels, you are able to convey your point in the best possible manner, depending upon the kind of tool that you're using to create that digital story and create your own statement in terms of your viewpoint. Then we talk about mapping in journalism. When we say mapping, where is very important aspect. And as you've all learned in news writing, there are 5 W's and 1 H, around which all news revolves in journalism. So the where aspect is highly important. The geography, the culture, the politics, the economics, all of it has a lot to do with any event occurring at a particular place. For example, we had Nepal earthquake a few years back, and it had its certain geographical features. Where is Nepal based? Which parts of the country was more affected? Say, for example, Arab Spring. Arab Spring is an example of political environment and how the political environment becomes different. This is also including in mapping of journalism. And then shift in power balance in the United States. It has had its own economic implications. So this is also a part of mapping in journalism. So what is the point that is coming across? That polity-wise, economy-wise, society-wise, demography-wise, all these aspects come under mapping in journalism. While a few years back, the name of the place in the story was enough, or 1 or 2 shots of the location were adequate when you were talking about, say, for example, Nepal earthquake. But today, digital savvy readers prefer to have an immersive experience. So feeling the place, exploring more than what one shot offers, navigating from one place to another, or visiting different locations to find out more information. Now, it would be interesting and enriching to be a part of the scene and experience, the fun, the excitement, the horror, the pain, which is accompanied with that story. So with live broadcast and geotagging, there is a lot more information which is being garnered, which is being generated from various locations. And the information which is generated from various sites can be an excellent resource for the journalists, also for researchers as well. Now, putting this information together and then converting it into a story can be a challenging task, because with mapping and 360-degree videos, one can experience moments with the broadcaster and take a look around. It's one step closer to actually being there. But then integrating it into the story while you're narrating the story, while you're talking about this digital storytelling and the art of it, becomes a slightly important, careful job. So, the new technologies which have made both generation as well as storage of data more possible, there is a lot of data based on locations like that. Maps are also a great tool for allowing user interaction and just a great way to tell stories. So you would have noticed whenever people travel to exotic places or to a new place, they put it on Facebook and it shows that from a certain airport, you're flying off to another city or another country. So it geotags it also and it tells about the place also. So this is how people make use of geotagging in their usual lives. Now, having spoken of all these amazing aspects of digital media and how they have affected the traditional media, traditional way of storytelling, we also should not forget the challenges that the digital media has to offer. And these challenges can be really important because it has a lot to do with the way we live our lives and the kind of impact this kind of a media has had on people's lives. So let us discuss what are these challenges. The first is fake information. There are a lot of inexpensive platforms and easy to use digital tools. As easy and simple they are to be used, we must appreciate the fact that they can also be misused. So democratized media landscape, on one hand, it provides the affordability and the access to certain kind of data, certain kind of apps, and the idea of creating your own media content. But there is a lot of inaccurate information on the net as well. So post-truth is what this is called. This phenomena in mass communications is called post-truth. And it talks about the circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal belief. When you create a fake news, it is not based on facts. It does not have so much of credibility in it. But it will have an appeal which will make you feel more motivated to take action towards it. And that is why they make use of the emotional angle or the personal belief part of it. Then there are a number of organizations also that conduct fact-checking. And such initiatives need to be supported by digital literacy campaigns. Now, there are two things. One is we require some agencies that will bust the fake news that are so prevalent these days. And the other is that the audience themselves need to be so digitally literate that they should be able to differentiate between the information which is coming their way and whether it is fake news or whether it can be called a credible piece of news. So while there are agencies that are busting fake news, there are other agencies, an alternative segment of media, which is standing up to say whether the news that has been busted is also right or wrong. You can see the kind of businesses that are springing up. There's a whole new business angle to this. But nevertheless, it is important to understand in our daily lives which kind of information to believe and which not to believe. People are in general flooded with information. Earlier, it was thought that it is the bounden duty of the media to come up with credible news and only give credible news to the audiences. Today, that is not the case anymore. The entire responsibility rests with us, the audiences, to confirm that the news or the information which we are consuming is right or wrong, and then take an informed decision. Then another aspect is the online abuse and threats in form of trolling. I don't think trolling will be a new word for all of you. But internet trolls, what is a troll? It is a computer user who constructs the identity of sincerely wishing to be a part of the group which is in question, but whose real intention is to cause disruption or to trigger conflict for the purposes of one's own amusement, or purpose can be anything else also. So Dr. Clare, he has categorized these trolls. And there are various kinds of trolls. Of course, these kinds of trolls could also have increased now as we speak. One is RIP trolls. They cause misery on memorial sites. And then there are fame trolls. These are basically trolls that are done to provoke celebrities so that they give a wrong statement and it becomes news. And then third is the care troll. These are the people who see abuse in every post about children, about animals, or some such thing. So they are looking for a chance to create a fracas. Then there are political trolls. These are the trolls that will bully MPs and other politicians, post negative things about them on their social media platforms. Then there are subcultural trolls. Now, these are the trolls that will derail conversations with silly questions, and these are also the people who hack sites and all. So these are the people who will take away your attention and distract you into discussing something altogether different from what the initial topic of discussion was. These are subcultural trolls. Then, of course, there are the more dangerous kinds, professional trolls. Now, what are professional trolls? These are those trolls whose careers are built on their willingness to say unsayable things and attract huge amount of attention and hits through it. So these professional trolls, nowadays, they are also given occupation with various kinds of political parties, businesses, so on and so forth, because they are able to create the kind of attention in a media-full world. So people have no time to look at certain kind of information. There, if you're able to catch the attention of your audience, you obviously become a little more important than the others. That is how professional trolls work. So having spoken of these things, I hope you found this session on digital media beneficial and you have some takeaways with you. And you will also keep in mind that when you are operating in your daily lives, you are more careful with the information that you are creating or consuming. So digital literacy for all of this is the key. Thank you all very much.
You were listening to a program titled Emergence of Digital Media Part 2, Program Code MAJMC, MAJEM and PGJMC. Course Code MJM020. The presenter and content coordinator of the program was Dr. Shikha Rai, Associate Professor, School of Journalism and New Media Studies, IGNOU. The program was technically supported by P.P. Sharma, edited by Sadan Lal, and produced by Santosh Kumar Pandian. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Productions Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University, New Delhi.